welcome back to day 21 or way 21 that one can get started in real estate investing. Now, if you didn't catch yesterday's video, day number 20, we had talked a little bit about rezoning, and this is a little bit of a continuation on that part. Similar idea, basically how to get more value out of an existing plot of land than what might have originally been there. And I'm going to explain a little bit here going forward. We're basically going to talk about land flipping. Now, you might be asking, what in the world is that? Now, I am far from an expert in this area. Full disclosure, I have not partaken in this way to invest in real estate. I just picked up a few things on this. Now, as far as an expert in this field, I would highly recommend Mark Podolsky, home of the Land Geek, who runs a very successful land flipping business, has numerous courses, podcasts, videos, books on the subject, and has taught thousands of students across the United States of how this can work. And I can attest as well, if you caught my podcast interview with Joey Murray, one of the guys from Wealth Without Wall Street, one of their businesses for passive income is a land flipping business as well. So there are numerous people, within my own network, within my own ecosystem, if you will, that I know have done this and have been very successful on it. So I'm just going to go over very generally speaking of what this entails. So basically, as you may have remember from an earlier video of fix and flipping, where we're basically purchasing a property, fixing it up, and then flipping it or reselling it to someone else and getting a profit. This is basically flipping a plot of land. Now, there's a little bit of due diligence involved in this. You're not just going to go out and say, oh, I see that plot of land's for sale, I'm going to buy it and flip it. Got to be a little due diligence on this, and typically you want to be in an area where there isn't as much competition for it. Now, where do you find these plots of lands for sale? Typically, probably one of the easiest areas is tax auctions. If Mr. Smith owns a plot of land, maybe it's just a barren spot of land, maybe it's what they call the back 40 for many farmers that for whatever reason they just don't do anything with it anymore. They don't farm it, just has no purpose for it. Maybe they just inherited it. A lot of times when someone passes away, the person may own a plot of land and that goes to their heirs. Maybe they live out of state, maybe they're even out of country, and they're like, well, what am I going to use this plot of land for? It isn't an oceanfront property, it isn't a beach, it isn't a prime agricultural parcel, or whatever the case may be. So in many cases, there might be a plot of land that's just got inherited by someone, and for whatever reason they just say, you know what, I don't want it, I don't want to deal with it. And maybe the records are so bad that they don't even know they own it. Maybe, someone passes away, they didn't have a will, and the state basically steps in, and they decide, who owns what or who gets what, and maybe there isn't any heirs to be found. So perhaps the plot of land just becomes property of the state. Or maybe there was sometimes you'll see a property tax bill for only a couple $100s, and if that tax bill isn't paid, like we had talked about earlier with tax liens, if there's a lien placed on a property, if a property gets just forfeited to the state, taxes aren't paid, then the taxing authority has the option that they'll just auction off this property. And many times the government doesn't want to be in the landlording business or land owning business, so they'll just tell an investor that comes along, and maybe it's just a plot of land out there. It's like, look, there's $200 unpaid property tax. You, the investor, come in, say, I'll pay that unpaid property tax, or pay for this plot of land that's on auction. Perfect, sounds good. Now the investor owns this little plot of land. Okay, now what do we do with it? Maybe this is just literally a section of a land that's been carved out years and years ago. Maybe it was part of an old homestead over here that the previous owner just didn't do anything with. There's a host of reasons that this could be the case. But in any case, the investor is going to go and say, I'm going to flip this piece of land. Now, where do you flip it to? Well, a lot of times, the easiest might just be the neighbor over here. You can look up any GIS map pretty much in the country now, and then find out this plot of land, sits right next to Mr. and Mrs. Jane Smith, for instance, and maybe reach out to them and say, hey, I just purchased this land next to you. Would you have any interest in buying it? And again, there's a whole, magnitude of reasons why or why not someone would want to own this. Maybe this homestead is really landlocked. Maybe there's a, farming operation here that the farmer would love to expand. I don't know, maybe put another dairy barn up. Maybe they want to, expand their farming operations. Maybe this is a good prime farming area. Maybe this is good cropland. But the person that passed away that just let it forfeit or, go to the state and pay the property taxes, maybe they retired, maybe they gave up on farming, maybe they inherited it. Their father, their grandfather was into farming, but again, they're out of state. They're maybe out of the country. They have no intent to farm it, whatever. And so let's just say we talked to the neighbor there and we talked, we just basically got this plot of land for $200. I'm just giving this for an overall example. But maybe this plot of land is worth, let's just say $2,000. Now, in and of itself, you're probably not just going to go to someone and say, here's this plot of land essentially in the middle of nowhere, as far as what this person's concerned. Hey, I'll sell it to you for $2,000. That's probably not going to work all that well. But again, if we have a neighbor here that maybe wants to expand their farming operation, expand out their dairy barn, increase their farm yield, and before, this is where the property line was, but maybe they're interested, yes, I will buy this plot of land that you just purchased, you as the investor, for $200 at this tax auction. And let's just say it's worth $2,000. I'm just throwing out numbers. And for whatever reason, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's, I don't know, taxes got to be in the way. And this farmer over here, it's like, golly, I'd love to pay for that. Kyle, it's only $2,000, but gosh, I just got hit with a huge tax bill. I'm going to need that money to put towards this dairy barn or expansion or whatever I'm doing. So then he might offer, well, instead of purchasing it for $2,000 or whatever the case may be, maybe it's a large plot of land. Maybe it's worth $20,000. And you say, well, Mr. Farmer, instead of you paying me $2,000 or $20,000 or whatever the lump sum is of what that land is worth, what if you pay me an installment sale? What if, oh, I don't know, you just decide, what, I don't know, 6% interest at maybe, let's just say a 60-month term. You could do a balloon payment, you could do without a balloon payment. You'll probably notice a lot of this has to do or has similarities with the previous discussions on contract for deeds or what are called seller-backed finance instruments. So maybe let's just say, I don't know, this plot of land is worth $20,000. You say, Mr. Farmer, I'll sell this to you on a 60-month installment sale at 6% interest. And I'm not going to get out a calculator and factor what that is. But, let's just say, whatever you agree to, it comes to a payment. And that's the key word here is the payment of, let's just say, $500 a month. And maybe, I don't know, $500 a month times 60 months, that comes to $30,000. Nice little profit for you. Maybe the farmer can afford that $20,000 or can't afford that $20,000 payment up front for the plot of land. But yes, I could afford $500 per month as an installment sale. So essentially you are the bank selling this plot of land to the farmer. Now, here's kind of a nice little tidbit when it comes to land flipping. Mark Podolsky of The Land Geek has mentioned this numerous times on numerous podcasts that he's been on, and eventually I hope to get him on my podcast as well. But when it comes to land and any type of a seller-backed finance instrument, if you have just one or two here and there, it's typically not a big deal. However, if you remember from the big financial catastrophe back in around 2008, there was a little piece of legislation of the Dodd-Frank bill. And one of the provisions in there is that you had to adhere to many, criteria, many record keeping nuances. And basically, if you were going to be the bank or be a seller backed or have a seller backed finance instrument, you would be subject to a lot of these regulations of the Dodd-Frank bill. Whether you're, just you yourself and have a couple of notes out there, or if you're a big, Bank of America or JP Morgan Chase or whatever the case may be. Now, little loophole with this, with the Dodd-Frank, if you're doing an installment sale on, say, a seller-backed finance agreement, it's a contract for deed for a residential property, and maybe have several of those, you could always outsource the servicing of that to a loan servicer. That is a little bit of a loophole that you aren't don't have to adhere to the Dodd-Frank regulations. The servicing company has to adhere to them. So for a nominal fee, you might just say, hey, here's this installment sale on this residential building that I'm selling back to the eventual owner on a contract sale, and the servicing company is going to charge me a fee, and they're going to handle all the regulations, all the paperwork, etc., through Dodd-Frank. Now, it's interesting with land, there isn't anyone living on there. There's no toilets, there's no trash, there's no termites, there's no tenants there. It's literally just a plot of land. Now, with that, because of it, it completely circumvents the Dodd-Frank regulations. Since there's no tenants, toilets, essentially any landlording to worry about, Dodd-Frank does not apply. So you could have one plot of land that you sell back on installment sale to this farmer. You could have 10, you could have 100, you could have a 200. And all these land installment sales or land flipping circumvents the Dodd-Frank regulations. So you basically just sit back and collect the paychecks, and Mr. Farmer or Mr. Neighbor next door, they pay you the installment of, say, $500 a month for 60 months. And what you got for, a small little down payment of buying this from a tax auction could turn into a nice sizable profit. Again, a little tidbit like we talked about yesterday. Installment sales, like we've talked about with notes, if you remember from my podcast with Fred Maskowitz, back in, I think this was February, that had him on my podcast. Typically any installment contracts, there's principal that gets paid back and interest is taxed a little bit heavily than other forms of income, whether it's, passive or dividends from stocks, or, a flow through entity from residential rentals, for instance. Typically your interest payments from contract installment loans is going to be taxed at your highest marginal tax rate. So if you're in the 22, 24 or higher percent tax bracket, this could, get hit a little bit harder with the taxes. And versus other forms of real estate, there isn't any depreciation or other tax mitigation steps you can put in place. It's pretty much, hey, Mr. Farmer's paying you $500 a month for this installment sale. Maybe the first couple payments, it's, just throwing out round numbers here, $250 principal, that is cash paid back to you, and then $250 of interest. That $250 of interest might be subject to your highest marginal tax rate of 22, 24, up to where we at, I think 37% is the highest marginal tax rate, or could be higher depending on when you're listening to this later on YouTube. One other option you have here, one of my all-time favorite accounts, is if you do this within a Roth IRA or Roth 401k, or basically a retirement account that has the word Roth in it. All those profits then flow into the Roth, and all those proceeds come out from the Roth tax-free. So like we talked about with the interest from a land flipping installment sale, whether versus your highest marginal tax rate, have it flow through a Roth IRA. And when you turn 59 and a half, you can get all those proceeds tax-free. Heck, you could have a Roth set up, maybe you got a couple $100,000 in that. Maybe you have a land flipping business in that Roth IRA versus the traditional, 3-4% drawdown of the Roth IRA that you might hear many financial advisors talk about. quick numbers, if you have $100,000 in your IRA, take out 4% a year, or in this case, $4,000 out of $100,000. In theory, that 4% drawdown every single year should keep it pretty stabilized that you don't run out of money. Now, that's been kind of kicked out the window the last few years with low interest rates from banks and a lot of returns getting suppressed. But essentially, if you want to and have a land flipping business within a Roth IRA, and pick a number, you have $50,000 in there, $100,000, $1 million, whatever the case may be, and you have 30, 40, 50 of these installment contracts on land flips, you could essentially have that cash flow just circle right back to your bank account, and that's 100% tax free. There's basically no principal drawdown. You're essentially living off the interest or installment sale payments, and that could be a retirement account for you, another stream of income in retirement versus worrying about the volatility of the stock market or the depressing returns from a typical bond portfolio, just to give a couple examples out there. So kind of in closing here, way number 21 that you can get started in real estate investing is through land flipping. Again, I'm far from an expert in this area. I'm just talking in very, very general terms of how the concept works. I'll have additional resources in the show notes, but remember Mark Podolsky, the land geek, he is the king of this, and someone I personally know, Joey Murray of the Wealth Without Wall Street guys. This is one of their streams of passive income as well. So hope you learned a couple of things from this as we are winding down April for Financial Literacy Month of 30 ways you can get started in real estate investing. We still have 9 videos to go, so be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Take care.